Good to see everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Freilich and Hanukkah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we are Daf Yud Amud Yud. Well, actually, we turned to Yud Aleph, page 11a. That's right. We got to 11a. We have been discussing a number of laws about fasting, and then we started talking about the story of Yaakov and his sons, Lama Tisra'u. Yaakov told his sons, don't show yourself as if you're feeling great, as if you're Lama Tisra'u. Why are you showing off that you're satisfied, you're satiated, and don't show off in front of the people of Esav, the children of Esav, the children of Yishmael. They don't have food; they're all starving, and you're showing off to them. So better you should go and travel and go to Egypt and buy food, even though you don't really need it. And that was in connection with our Gemara talking about being in an area where everyone else is fasting. You also should fast. It's a similar concept, that you don't want to show off, so to speak, or hurt their feelings that you're not fasting and they are. Not participating in the communal fast. The Gemara then mentioned that al tirgazu baderech, which is another pasuk about Yaakov, about Yosef telling his brothers, don't tirgazu, don't be angry along the way. And the Gemara explains that means that don't be involved in a dvar halacha and learning Torah, because you might lose the way. The Gemara asks questions from the story of Elisha and Eliyahu, that they're supposed to be talking divrei Torah. It's questionable what they were talking. Were they actually talking divrei Torah? So Taisa says that they were actually talking idle chatter. He brings a medrash that they were actually talking Yesh medrash, that they were medabrim dvarim b'telim. Taisa says there is such a medrash. The Gemara, the way our Gemara understands that story is that they were talking divrei Torah, and that's why they didn't get burned with the fire. Again, a fire came and separated them and brought Eliyahu to heaven. This is the story. We're hopefully going to get up to it when we reach Malachim Beis, the book of Kings 2, in chapter 2. But in the meantime, the story is that Elisha was a student of Eliyahu, and he was with him the end of his life when Eliyahu went up to heaven. And our Gemara brings an implication from the verse there that they were talking divrei Torah, and that's why they didn't get burned from the fire that came, as it says that there was a rechavesh and susayesh, there was a chariot of fire, horses of fire that came and separated between them and took up Eliyahu to heaven. So why didn't they get burned? Because they were talking divrei Torah. So Taisus brings a medrash that says they were talking dvarim b'telim, and they were fit to be burned. So the question is, what does that mean? Were they really talking dvarim b'telim? Is that what it means literally? What does the medrash mean? We're talking about Elisha and Eliyahu, Elijah and Elisha and Elijah. Is it possible to say they were talking dvarim b'telim? So the implication is that Elisha, the understanding is that they were really not talking dvarim b'telim, like idle chatter, but they weren't talking divrei Torah mamish. They weren't talking exactly divrei Torah. They were talking about matters of what's going to happen after Eliyahu passes away, and Elisha is supposed to receive double the level of prophecy that Eliyahu had. So they were talking about that. Really, they should have been talking about practical, I guess, divrei Torah more than that. And because of that, it says they were fit, so to speak, to be to be burned. They weren't, but because they're what they were talking was not total idle chatter, but therefore there is a medrash that uses that term that they were talking idle chatter, but it was on near level. It was considered more idle chatter. But nevertheless, anyway, our Gemara understands it that they were talking to Torah, and therefore our Gemara questions the story with Yosef telling his brothers, don't get involved in Torah study while you're traveling because you're going to lose the way. What do you mean? You have to get involved in Torah study when you're traveling. That's a part of the obligation. Our Gemara doesn't bring it, but it does say which means while you're going on your way, you're supposed to seemingly you're supposed to be talking to Torah. But the Argamar brings that it's you see from the story of Eliyahu and Elisha that you're supposed to be talking to Torah. Otherwise, you're fit to be burned. So the Gemara answers that there's two types of learning Torah. One is if you learn in depth, and the other is if you just learn more on a surface level. If you learn more on a surface level, it's not going to affect you. You're not going to lose your way. If you learn in depth, that's a problem. If you're studying, the same thing applies if you're driving a car. It's very nice to listen to shiurim, but you got to make sure that it's not going to cause you to be swerving back and forth into different lanes that you're trying to drive, and you're also listening to very nice in-depth Torah, but might not be the most safe thing to do, and therefore a person should probably not be listening to a in-depth discussion if they have to put their mind to it fully, and instead they should pick something that's a little more lighter, or at least if they know the discussion and they're just reviewing, that would be something that would be probably safer. But to have an in-depth, that could cause, obviously every person knows their capabilities, but would be part of this idea of al tirgazu baderach, don't do anything dangerous of learning Torah while you're traveling, and you could have a negative impact. Simply, it could cause you to lose your way, but it could be even worse. So the Gemara then mentions that you should take these large steps to see a gasa, and we said if a person takes these large steps, it actually takes away 500th of their 1/500th of their vision. So then I mentioned to you Taisus' question. Taisus asked a question: what about if a person takes 500 of these steps? So does he lose his full vision? He loses it completely. He loses everything, right? If you take 1/500th of your vision every time you take this large step, so it would seem that if you took 500 of them, so each one you lost 1/500th, you ultimately lose a person would lose all his vision, and doesn't seem to be true in a practical sense. It doesn't seem to happen. So I really wonder what the eye doctors would say about taking these large steps, if how it impacts a person's vision. But our Gemara says that it does. It takes away 1/500th of his vision, and Taisus answers this question with a few points. He says, number one, it's not that you lose 1/500th each time, and then ultimately after 500 steps, you're going to lose the person loses all their vision. It means that whatever's left after the first time, you lost 1/500th of your vision. Whatever's left, you lose another 1/500th of your vision. Whatever's left from that, you lose another 1/500th of your vision. And therefore, you're always left with 99%. You're just left with a 499. You're always left with 499 parts of your vision. You just lose one of the 1/500th of your vision. But it's from whatever's left from the last big step that you took. Whatever's left after that, you only lose 1/500th of what's left, and therefore you always have the 499 parts of your vision. The Taisus' example is based on a halacha having to do with inheritance of the person has a lot of daughters and he also has a son. So the way it works is each daughter is supposed to take some type of financial help to be able to support her, and for to get married until she gets married, and the son is supposed to inherit. So the case is, the Gemara talks about it, if they take 1/10, each girl is supposed to get 1/10 of the inheritance. So what happens if a person has 10 girls? So they would end up eating up the entire inheritance, and then the son who's supposed to inherit, and he's the main inheritor, he would get nothing. but he's biblically supposed to be the person who inherits. So the Gemara explains that doesn't mean each daughter gets 10%, and ultimately there's nothing left after the 10th daughter. It means each daughter the oldest daughter takes 10%, and then whatever's left of that, the next daughter takes 10% of what's left, and each of the 10 daughters will take whatever's left from the previous daughter's taking. Whatever's left after that, they get the 10%, and ultimately at the end there's a 90% left that goes to the son. There's 90% not left from the first daughter, but whatever's not the 90% of what's left from the last daughter is going to go to the son. So that's how Taisus explains this case with the 500. Then Taisus mentions, why should the first step that a person makes, why should he lose more vision than the second time? In other words, the first time you divide his vision up into 500 parts. So the first step he takes, he loses 1/500th, right? He loses a large amount of his vision, 1/500th. Then whatever is left of his vision is again divided into 500 parts. And if he takes another step, he loses 1/500th of what's left. Now, which one is worse, the first step or the second step? So according to that calculation, the first step you lose a large. Imagine if you could calculate vision into, let's say, 1,000 particles. So the first time he takes a large step, so he loses 1/500th, which would be like 2 parts of the 1,000. But then the second step he takes, he only loses from what's left 1/500th. So let's say he loses one part of 1,000 or something, a little less than the first one. So he's losing less and less every time he takes that step. Why should that be? If taking large steps causes one to lose vision, why should the first step be worse than the future steps? So Taisus gives 2 answers. He says that possibly that the first step that a person takes is really what he loses his vision. After that, since he's used to taking this step, his eyes don't get affected by taking these large steps. So he only loses 1/500th of his vision. In the future steps, he actually doesn't lose anything. So that sort of like changes his first shot. Initially, he was saying each step you lose 500th, 1/500th. Then he says, but then why should that be? That first step you lose more than the second step? But then he answers that actually no, it's not a problem. That the first step is what really where you lose the first step is where you lose the 1/500th, and after that you're already like you lost that vision, and you're used to taking these large steps, so your eyesight doesn't get affected by it. The second answer that he gives is that the first step that you take is sort of like more impactful on your eyes, because it's when you start something, it causes more of a dent, and afterwards it's not as so every time you take a bigger step, so that each step makes it less impact on you, and so therefore the first step will take more 1/500th, the bigger 1/500th. The next step will take from whatever left, the 1/500th. So this second answer is seemingly fits with what Taisus initially said, that the first step you lose a bigger part, the second step you lose less. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah. Besides big steps being bad, aren't also small steps bad? Because it says that just before the Churban, one of the ways that the girls were inciting the boys to Zima was by taking small steps.
I'm not familiar with it. I have to look it up. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I'll have to take a look. Do you know if that's a Gemara or a Medrash? Or is it do you know where that's brought down?
Yeah, I mean,
it could be. What I'm remembering something now, that maybe there is something about an act of arrogance when you take a small step, walking slow. Maybe it's just walking slow, or extra slow, or does it mean taking small steps like it's an element of arrogance? I'm not sure. We'll have to look up these things. Doesn't
I
say it here.
also remember that another thing that they used to do was that a tall girl would walk along with a short girl so that the tall girl would look taller and therefore more inflame the bacher,
Inflame the what? The Yitzhak?
of the bacher.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Or excite him. Uh-huh. Right. Uh-huh. Anyway, okay. So that was the discussion over here about taking steps, and it also mentioned about entering the city when it's light out, and Yetze b'chitayv, Kanis b'chitayv, leaving the city when it's light out, entering the city when it's light out, and then the Gemara mentioned about eating during a famine, or I'm sorry, going. It mentioned eating while traveling should be similar to eating by a famine, and which means that don't overeat. Eat less than you're used to, eat less than you should, maybe. And the reason the Gemara gave was two reasons. One was because ma'ayanar, which means a person's ma'ayim, person's intestines, person's insides. You if you exercise too much after eating, it's not good for your stomach. It'll cause a disorder, and so therefore, person who's traveling, if you don't eat so much, you don't have this problem. But if you eat a lot, then you're sort of like exercising after you're eating. It's walking a lot after you're eating is problematic. The Gemara gave another reason, and that had to do with if you eat a lot when you're traveling, then you're going to run out of food. And when a person travels, at least in times of the Gemara, it was not always food available. They didn't have rest areas and communities growing in every up and coming and developing. When a person traveled, you could go days without having without having reaching settled land. So therefore, the person shouldn't eat when they're traveling more than they normally would eat in the time of famine, because you want to conserve whatever you have in order for save it for the rainy day, save it for when you're stuck out there in the in the no man's land, and you have no in your and there's nowhere to get food. So at least you'll have some left if you don't overeat while you're traveling. So that was the two reasons. And the Gemara said that what would be the difference between them? The Gemara said the difference would be the person's in a boat, and if he's in a boat, so then it's not a problem for the fact of that he's exercising, because in the boat you're not really exercising, you're sitting. The boat is traveling. So but you could eat a lot because it's not going to affect you. I guess if a person doesn't get seasick, because people get seasick, maybe they also boat is also bad. But people who don't get seasick, they could eat a lot in the boat. But if the reason is because of exercising, walking after for your stomach, walking after eating. But if the reason has to do with not having food, so the boat could get stuck in a storm, and who knows what, you could get stuck in the ocean. Who knows how long it's going to take? They could take the wrong turn, and you'll be stuck there. You want to have food. So because of food, it would be a good idea not to overeat while you're in a boat. Not that overeating is ever good, but these are times when you have to be extra careful, because it could cause a person to die of starvation. I mean, it would, it's a very serious issue, not just about not indulging, but it has to do with the person's life could be in danger. So sitting in a boat would be a situation which, depending on the reason, could be would be would be okay, or could be not okay. Depends on the reason. Why are you not supposed to eat when you're traveling? And maybe the same thing could be a car. Your car, you're not exercising, you're sitting in the car. So theoretically, maybe because of the stomach issue, maybe it's not such a problem if you eat a substantial amount. But if it's the issue of running out of food, so then it might depend on where you live. If you're traveling through from Vegas to California where there's nothing along the way or something. I don't know. It depends on where you're traveling. So you could be stuck without food. But I guess the car, I guess you're there within a few hours. Maybe it's not such a problem. But there are areas actually when we were traveling to Idaho from Utah. I remember there's like no gas stations, so like a few hundred, you like have to fill up before you go through this span. So it's like if you get stuck over there, you're stuck. I mean, there's like there's no gas stations for over 100 miles, and so that would be like similar to here with food. So that would be with gas. You got to fill up before, and don't waste the gas. You need to you need to make sure to get to your next gas station before you run out. So it depends on the reason over here of why a person shouldn't eat extra during during their traveling. So the Gemara says another difference, and this is where we're up to. We're up to on page 11a. 11a, and if you're in the art scroll, it is 11a1. The first words are the Yosef Biarva that we did yesterday, if he's sitting in a ship. And the next difference between these two reasons is Inami. It's also the Ka'ozol Me'avna Liavna. He is going from one maloin, one inn, one hotel, from one hotel to another hotel, and obviously they're in different villages. Rashi adds Kfar L'Kfar. So, but the thing is, so each of these villages does have food, but the problem you'll have is the fact is that you're still causing even though from one place to the next place you will have food, but you're still causing there to be a problem of your stomach could your intestines could be affected by eating too much and exercising and walking. Okay, so then the Gemara tells us, by the way, I should mention that this idea of looking into the reasons behind the law, and it causes a difference in halacha. We did have yesterday as well, which we were talking about, and we should just mention it, that we spoke about the concept of with regard to fasting for a tzara, for a challenging time, and if the challenge, if the situation changes, and the person is no longer in that situation. So, for example, if the community is davening for something, and they get they get what they wanted. The person got better, or they got rain, or whatever they were davening for they were saved. The enemy, so a war was going on. The enemy left. So there were different reasons why do they not have to finish the fast if the issue got resolved. So there were different reasons. Based on the different reasons could have a difference in halacha. So, for example, one of the reasons that we said that a community doesn't need to finish the fast because the matter got resolved, we said had to do with the fact that it was we are lenient when it comes to a community. We don't want to burden the community. It's a tircha of a tzibur, so we don't burden the community. But there was another reason that had to do with the fact that a community is obligated in Hallel, saying praising Hashem. So they shouldn't continue the fast, because now that the matter got resolved, they're obligated in thanking Hashem. So they should thank Hashem, like today we're thanking Hashem in Hallel. They have an obligation of thanking Hashem with joy. Therefore, they shouldn't be fasting. Now, according to these two different reasons, there were other reasons as well, but just here you have a difference. What happens if they were davening for something and now the matter is too late? Like it's too late, and it got worse. So, for example, the person died. They were davening for a community member, and the community member died. So they were fasting. So should they finish the fast? So it depends. If the reason is because you're supposed to say Hallel, thank Hashem for resolving the matter. So if the person died, this would not contradict their fasting. If the person got better, it could be a reason why they should the person got better, maybe then stop fasting. But if the person passed away, so there's no reason to pray. They're not going to be saying Hallel, so therefore they would be allowed to fast. But if it has to do with the tircha de tzibura, that we don't want to be matriach to bother the community, so then according to that reason, it would mean that even in this case, we shouldn't bother the community, and we should let them. They should be able to break their fast. So again, based on the different reasons, and this is in halacha, this is how things get resolved in halacha. We follow whichever reason is more accepted in the halacha, but often the halacha follows a few reasons. So even if one doesn't apply, the other one applies. So often there are times that we find that in Shulchan Aruch it's strict according to both reasons. And anyway, yesterday, so that's one of the things we were discussing yesterday, different reasons why if a community was fasting, that there are times that they don't have to finish the fast. Okay, so getting back to where we are now, the Gemara continues and it says, Rav Papa called Parsa Uparsa Ochol Chada Rifta. It says Rav Papa, every time he walked a Parsa, and a Parsa we said was 4 mil. And 4 mil a mil is like a mile. Mil is the amount of time that the matzah has to be baked within the time of a mil. So generally we say that the matzah in the matzah bakery, it'll rise. It's not baked within the time of a mil. You generally say a mil is 18 minutes, right? And when you get the matzah bakery, the Pesach matzah, that matzah has to be baked within 18 minutes. That's a mil. Now a parsa is 4 mil. So that would mean it's 72 minutes. However, there is one other opinion that a mil is 24 minutes, which would make a parsa to be the amount of length of a path that's longer, that takes not 72 minutes to walk, but 96 minutes to walk. 24 times 4, so it would be 96 minutes distance. That would be the amount of a parsa. So Rav Papa, every parsa that he traveled, he would eat a rifta, a loaf of bread. Now, Kasavar Mishum Mayana, he said that the problem of eating too much had to do with the fact that exercising on a full stomach, and because Rav Papa, there's other Gemaras that mentioned that Rav Papa was a very, very fat man, and being so fat, he did not have this problem of his stomach being affected by him eating so much. Even though he ate every 72 minutes, he ate a whole loaf of bread, but it did not affect his stomach. But however, if the reason had to do with you might run out of bread, maybe he shouldn't have eaten so much. But he didn't hold that was the reason of this halacha. He held the reason of this halacha had to do with mayana, with his stomach not being able to handle the food, and for him that reason was not a problem. Therefore, he was able to have as much food as he wanted because it did not affect his stomach because of his size. Okay, so the Gemara continues and says, Rav Yudah says in the name of Rav, person who starves himself or minimizes, I should say, his diet, the years of famine. Nitzal mimisa mashuna, he is saved from misa mashuna. Misa mashuna is something we say in davening, that Hashem should save us from a misa mashuna, a strange death, unusual death. Generally, it means of by the sword, or like a cruel type of death, or so we say that or I guess starvation would be included, nitzel from misa mashuna, because he's careful not to eat too much in the years of raiva and in the years of famine. so he is saved from a misa mishuna, from a strange death. So so the Gemara continues and says, Shenemar, as it says in a pasuk, Ra'av padcha mimaves, in famine, Ra'av, famine, time of famine, padcha mimaves, he redeemed you from death. Now, may Ra'av mi boile. It really should have said not Bira'av, in famine, he saved you from death, but rather from a famine, from a time of famine, mi boile, he saved you from death. What does that mean? Or it should say Bera'av, Hadcha me Ra'av. That's the way they're translating it. That from Ra'av, from famine, he saved you from the pains of famine. In other words, that you won't suffer. So why does it say in Ra'av he saved you from death? Elohachi Kamar. But this is what it means to say, in the merit of a person paining himself by fasting, by Marav he hungers himself in the years of famine. He's nitzol mimisa mishuna. He's saved from a unusual death. So this pasuk of bira of padcha mimavas is translated a little differently than you would expect, and that is that because of you famining yourself, you starving yourself, you hungering yourself, I don't know if these are words, but you causing yourself hunger, and Hashem will save you from a negative death. Now, Amar Reish Lakish says, Asur la'adam l'shamish mitasai b'shnei raivon. Person is not allowed to have relations in the years of famine. Shenemar, as it says, Ula Yosef Yulad Shnei Banim. It says Yosef to Yosef, he gave birth to two sons. B'terem Tavei Shnas Hara, before the year of famine came. That means that the pasuk is telling us that if it would have been the year of famine already, he wouldn't have had these kids. He had these kids specifically because it was before the Torah is emphasizing. Don't think that he had these kids during the years of famine. No, during the years of famine, he didn't have relations. He had these kids before the years of famine. That's what the Gemara is telling us. That if the person is usher to be mashamish mitasai, person would be prohibited to have relations during the years of famine. Now, that's what we're learning from the pasuk. Now, the Gemara then says, Tana, we learned chasuche banim, person who doesn't have kids, hasn't fulfilled their mitzvah. A person who hasn't fulfilled their mitzvah of having kids, chasuche banim, person who's lacking kids, mishamshin mitesem b'shnei raivim, he would be allowed or maybe obligated to have relations during the years of famine because he has to fulfill his mitzvah. But people who are already fulfilled their mitzvah, they would be exempt from having kids. Now, Tosfos asked a very interesting question over here. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, doesn't it also say that on the Teva, everybody was prohibited from having relations, but Cham and the raven both violated that?
And the dog, three.
And the dog. And the dog.
Yeah. 3 violated it. Chum, the raven, and the dog. Yeah. So anyway, the question Tosfos asks over here is, what about Yocheved? Yocheved was born Bein HaChomes, in the border, between the walls. He was Yocheved. She was born while they were traveling. The question is, why did they travel to Egypt? Because of the famine. What year of famine was it? It was the second year of the famine. If it was the second year of the famine, how did Yocheved get born? It means her father and mother must have had relations during the famine. So the Gemara proves that Yosef didn't have relations during the famine. But what about Yocheved? This is a quite a strong question. We seem to have a proof that Levi, who was Yocheved's father, obviously didn't keep this. So we have Yosef, who seemed to follow this, but we also have Yocheved, who didn't keep it. Now, Taisus answers over here that this was not a law. It's a midas chasidus. That's the way Taisus answers. Now,
Rabbi?
Taisus answers that it's a midas chasidus, but not everyone agrees with that, with this answer. It's midas chasidus means it's an extra act of stringency, which means you don't have to keep it. Yes, Yehuda.
But didn't you also say that if you didn't have both a boy and a girl, that you were exempt from that?
So that is a good question. The Gemara says that chasuche banim, if a person is lacking children, they are allowed or maybe obligated to have relations. So what Yehuda is saying is that implies like you need to have a boy and a girl. And at this point, Levi had boys, but he didn't have girls. Right?
Right.
So if so, it would seem that he was obligated in having relations because he had kids. The only problem with this is Yosef also didn't have girls. So why didn't Yosef have relations? In other words, you're asking a question, and it's a very good question, and that is that l'chayra, it would seem that that Yosef and Levi were in the same boat, two brothers, and both of them did not have children, did not have fulfilled pru or vu yet. I mean, they had children, they didn't fulfill pru or vu, the mitzvah of having children, because they didn't have a boy and a girl. And yet Yosef seemed to have been strict and and he wasn't he didn't have relations, but Levi did have relations. But the question is, why is there even a level of stringency? It seemed that they didn't fulfill the mitzvah yet. So this is a very good question. So I will tell you, and it did bother me, this question, and I am aware that there is two ways of learning this Gemara, where it says that the chasuche banim, does that mean if they don't have any children, or it means if they did not fulfill the mitzvah of pru or vu? So Rashi here says they didn't fulfill the mitzvah of pru or vu like Yehuda was understanding. But there is another way of learning it, and that's probably the way Tosfos learned, and that is that if you don't have any children, then you did fulfill. You are prohibited from having relations. So even though you didn't fulfill pru or vu, but you do have children, you are not allowed to have relations, and that's the way Tosfos seems to be learning. In other words, the Gemara doesn't say clearly what it means chasuche banim. So Rashi learns it means like Yehuda understood over here, and that is that it means that they didn't fulfill pru or vu. But it seems that Tosfos learns that prohibition applies even to someone who didn't fulfill having children, as long as they at least have one child. They already are not allowed to have relations during the famine, and therefore Taisus is bothered if they're not allowed to have relations. How did Levi have relations with his wife and have a child Yocheved if they weren't allowed to have relations? And Yosef, it seems like he followed this rule that he wasn't allowed to have relations. Taisus answers that there's a difference between um, doing something that's extra and doing something that's the law. The Ar Gemara, it says it's usher. It doesn't mean it's usher midina from the law. It means it's more of a stringency. The problem that with Taisus that people ask is that why was Yosef on a different level than Levi? Seemingly, they both were in the same. They would both be strict. Seemingly, they both would be machmir. If there was a reason to be strict, Levi also would have been strict. So why was Yosef more machmir than Levi? Why was he more strict? And he didn't have relations, but Levi did have relations. So the thing is that don't want to include in Taisvis that there's a difference between Taisvis is talking before Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, there wasn't really a law, and because of that, because it was before Matan Torah, there was reason to say that Yosef might have had more of a stringency to it maybe followed more of a stringency, but it was but after Matan Torah, you don't have this difference between if it's us, if it's that it's only an act of stringency. Yes, Ezra.
Did you say that the fact that Levi was not oppressed like the others, that might have been reason?
So there is another answer here that Ezra's mentioning, and that is not Taisvis's answer. There's another answer that explains that that for Yosef it was usher. Why? Because Yosef, it doesn't go by the goyim who worship idols. It goes by if the Yidden are suffering from famine. So Yosef thought that his brothers were probably suffering from famine. The Jewish community was suffering from famine. So Yosef therefore felt obligated to keep this law. But Levi was living in Eretz Yisrael at the time with his family and with his siblings and his father, and they were not suffering. It was only the goyim that were suffering. So therefore, Levi didn't have to keep this law of being prohibited to having relations. That's pretty much what you wanted to say, Ezra, right? A little tweaking.
No, it wasn't the same. I was saying that the fact that since they were not going to be oppressed in Egypt.
Oppressed in Egypt or famine?
Well, when they came, when everybody came, the famine was still going on. But when they brought their father down, they were not going to be oppressed because of who they were. They were the tribe of the Kohanim.
But the thing is,
and the Kohanim in Egypt weren't,
yeah.
They could do whatever they want.
Right, but the thing is, this is way before that even began. This is they had relations. Levi had relations during the first year of the famine, or the beginning of the second year of the famine, before they even dreamed of coming to Egypt to live. They totally knew nothing about Joseph being alive. I mean, they were there was no vision of ever living in Egypt. You know what I mean? So it had to do with and also our Gemara is talking about the famine law. It's not to do with the suffering in Egypt. It had to do with being in famine. If there's a famine going on. So anyway, so these are a few answers that are given as to how Levi didn't keep this, but Yosef seemed to keep this. So in any event, our Gemara says that it's usher to be mishamish mitasi. So in the years of Retiree, in the years of famine. And the Gemara continues and says that Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis learned Bisman Yisrael Shruyin B'tzar, the time when Israel is surrounded, stuck, is steeped in tsar, in distress. Uperish echad mehen, and someone separates themselves from the community. Bo'in shnei malachi asharis. Two angels come. Two angels come, and Shemalavin loyla adam, that the angels that accompany a person. Umanichan lo yadein al rosh, and they place their heads on his head, and they say, Ploini zeh shapirsh benat tzibur, this so and so who has separated himself from the community, al yira ben achomas tzibur, he shall not see the salvation, the comfort of the community. In other words, he won't be able to benefit when they are comforted because he is not participating in the pain. So he is not going to be able to see in the when the community is the pain is alleviated and resolved. So Rashi adds over here that these are the two angels, one to the right and one to the left. It says Malach of Yitzav Alach, that Hashem sends his angels to us, L'shmarcha b'chol drachecha, to guard us in all our ways. So basically, wherever we go, we have these two angels. And these are actually the two angels that come to our house when we come home from shul on Friday night. The two angels, and there's one that's on our right, which is the angel that wants to speak positive about us. And then there's the angel on our left that wants to speak negative about us. And that's why if our household is ready for Shabbos, so the angel on our right gives us a bracha, and the angel on the left has to say amen to the right's bracha. But if the house is not ready for Shabbos, right, the angel on the left gives us a curse, and the angel on the right is obligated to say amen to the curse. So these are the two angels that we're talking about here. And the Gemara tells us that these two angels, if a person separates themselves from participating in the community pain, something that's going on in the community, and instead of like niyash nafshi hitzalti, instead of someone saying, "Oh, I say I'm okay, I have nothing to worry about," they have to be worried. I'm free. I'm going. Almost similar to the story of Rus, where Elimelech just takes off. He says, "Oh, they're suffering from famine. I'm going to Moab. I'll go and move. I'm rich. I can move. I don't have to give so much charity. Let me go to a nation where they're not going to be knocking on my door. Let me leave the community." So he left the community and went to another country, the country of Moab, and ultimately all the suffering that happened in the story of Rus, he died, his two sons died, they lost all their money, and so the concept of not separating from the community is something that's very serious, and it says that a person who does that will not benefit from the comfort or the consolation of when everything comes back to normal and there's salvation. Yes, David.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to leave the class. Can you just tell us again, when is the break? When is the no classes?
Tuesday, from Tuesday until Monday. So Monday we'll start up again. So I'll see you on Sunday and on Monday, and then we'll see you the next week, Monday.
All right. Thank you very much. Freilich and Hanukkah, everybody.
Freilich and Hanukkah. Have a good Shabbos. Okay.
Shabbos.
So the Gemara continues and says that Tanya Idach, we have another brisa. Again, we're on 11a in the Art Scroll 11a1, the last paragraph. Tanya Idach, we was taught in a brisa. Another brisa. Idach means another one, another brisa. The time that the community is steeped in distress, person shouldn't say, let me go to my house and I'll eat and I'll drink. The shalom alayach nafshi. and peace will be on my soul. I will not have to worry about everything else. Let me find some respite in my house with my food and my drink, and I'll be fine, and I don't have to participate in everyone else's tzaddus. V'shalom alayach nafshi. If a person does this and he basically doesn't care about the community's suffering, on him it says, V'hinei sasoin v'simcha. Behold, joy, sasoin, and simcha, happiness. Hareg bakar ushchait. Kill cattle and slaughter sheep. Achoil basar shasais yayin. Eat meat and drink wine. Achoil v'shasoi. Eat and drink. Ki machar namos, because tomorrow we will die. So what happens if a person does that? Maksiv basrei v'nigle ba'oznei Hashem tzivakos. It will be revealed in the ears of Hashem, master of tzivakos, of legions. Im yechupar ha'obain hazel lachem ad temusun. If you will be atoned for this sin until you die. Meaning that you won't be atoned for this sin until you die. So that is the concept of leaving the community, ignoring the suffering of the community, and it is considered a terrible sin. The Gemara continues and says, Ad kan midas beinin. This is, until here, is someone who's called a Beinani, that they're considered a intermediate level person. Aval b'midas rishayim, the wicked people, maksiv, what does it say about them? Eisayu ekhoyayin. Eisayu is from the word asa, come. It's an Aramaic word. Eisayu ekhoyayin. Come and I will get wine. V'nisba sheichar, and we will become drunk with old wine. Vahaya kazeh yoy machar. And it'll be like this day, tomorrow, even greater. Maksiv basrei, what does it say after that? Hatzadik avad, the righteous perished. Vein ish sam alev, no one takes to heart. Ki mipnei hara'av ne'asaf hatzadik, that it was because of the hara'av, mipnei hara'av, because of the evil that the tzaddik was killed. He died. Meaning that different interpretations here in Rashi. There's two interpretations that I'm just going to read it in Rashi. Mipnei mahu meis, why did he die? Mipnei hara'a nasaf hatzadik, because of the bad, the tzaddik was taken. Mipnei shelo yitztair hu b'ra'a, because shelo yitztair hu b'ra'a, he should suffer in the bad. V'yachar shigzera malfanav, and after there is a decree before Hashem, ki mipnei hara nasaf hatzadik, because of the bad, the tzaddik has to die. And what that means is that the tzaddik is not going to live to see the suffering. And then the second shot of Rashi is lashon acher mipnei rois shel elu hu nasaf, because of the bad that these people did. That's why the tzaddik dies. She'ena kadosh baruch hu roitze sheyivakish aleihem rachamim. Hashem doesn't want that this tzaddik will ask mercy for these people. Therefore, Hashem has to take his life away so that he doesn't pray for these wicked people who do not participate in the suffering of the community. So either the tzaddik dies so he doesn't have to see the suffering of the community, or the tzaddik dies so that he doesn't daven for the people who aren't participating in the suffering of the community. So that's what it talks about, the people who are not participating in the suffering of the community. That was, and then the Brisa continues and says, Eli Yitzayir Adam Matzibor, So what should a person do? He should paint himself together with the community. Shekain Matzino b'Moshe Rabbeinu, because we saw a similar thing with Moshe Rabbeinu. And what happened with Moshe Rabbeinu? He suffered with the community. As it says, the hands of Moshe were heavy. And this was with regard to the war with Amalek. They took a stone and placed it under him, and he sat upon it. Now, what does this mean? Did he not have something a little more comfortable? A car or a keses. A car is a mattress. Keses is a cushion, a pillow. But Moshe said, since the Yidden are steeped in distress, I will also be in tsar. So this is all about a person participating in the community's tsar. Even Moshe Rabbeinu did this, even though Moshe theoretically, could have didn't, he was not fighting the war, and he was davening to Hashem, but nevertheless, and he was on a very holy level, also very old, but nevertheless, he was davening for them, and he did not sit on a comfortable place. Instead, he just sat on a stone. The Brisa continues, and it says, what about a person who does participate in the suffering of the community? He will see the nechama, the salvation of the community. Maybe a person will ask, who's going to know if I don't participate? Who's going to testify against me if I don't participate in the suffering of the community? The stones of a person's house, the kairis beisay shaladam, and the beams of a person's house. Me'idin boy, they will testify against him and say about him that he did not participate in the community's pain. Shenem, as it says, ki even mikir tizak, the stone will shout from the wall. The kafis me'etz yanena. The kafis is a type of wall made from kafisin. Kafisin is like a certain size of a brick, half a brick. So a kafis me'etz yanena, the half a brick from a wood. From the wood will answer. In other words, and will say, this guy did not participate in the community pain. In other words, whatever you do was visible to the walls of your house, and they will testify against you. So a person shouldn't think no one knows what I'm doing inside my chadrei chadorim, inside the inner rooms of my house. It doesn't work that way. The walls will testify against you. So you can't exempt yourself, and therefore a person should always participate in the community matters. And if the community is suffering, a person should also feel the pain with the community. We're going to stop here. Everyone have a wonderful Chanukah, freilichen Chanukah, exciting Chanukah, and a good Shabbos. Sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody.
Freilichen Chanukah.